The envelope found me on a Thursday evening between a grocery flyer and a catalog I had never requested. I almost dropped it into the recycling bin unopened. Then I saw the return address for Cumberland Ridge Bank in Virginia, and my full legal name printed beneath the words personal and confidential. I had not lived in Virginia for 14 years. I had not spoken to my parents in almost as long. And I had never borrowed $286,900 from anyone. The bank said otherwise. According to the letter, I had personally guaranteed a commercial credit line for Rowan Custom Millwork, the company my father had owned since before I was born. The account was in default. As guarantor, I had 21 days to respond before the bank pursued collection. A copy of the guarantee was attached. At the bottom of page 6 was my name. Tessa M. Rowan. Not typed, signed. I stood in my Raleigh kitchen with one shoe still on, staring at the handwriting until the refrigerator motor clicked off, and the apartment seemed to hold its breath with me. Whoever had written it knew the way I crossed the second T in Tessa. They knew the short first stroke of my R. They even copied the upward hook at the end of my surname, a habit I had picked up in high school. It was close enough to fool someone, moving quickly through a stack of papers. Unfortunately for whoever signed it, I spent my career slowing down. For 11 years, I had worked in the Special Investigations Unit of a national insurance carrier. I investigated staged losses, forged endorsements, altered invoices, suspicious property transfers, fake contractors, and very real people who believed changing a date on paper changed what had happened in the world. My job rested on one simple principle: documents remember what people hope everyone else will forget. I never expected the most important file I would examine to have my own name on the tab. I was 32 when the letter arrived. I lived alone in a second-floor condo with a narrow balcony and 3 herb pots I kept forgetting to water. I liked predictable mornings, clean timelines, locked doors. Friends called me independent. My therapist once called me hypervigilant and waited while I pretended there was a meaningful difference. There was a reason I trusted proof. I grew up in Pine Haven, Virginia, a small town where everybody knew which family owned which truck and whose marriage was in trouble before the married people did. My father, Martin Rowan, built custom cabinets and staircases for half the county. Rowan Custom Millwork had a cedar sign by the highway, a workshop behind it, and a reputation my parents guarded like a family member. My mother, Diane, ran the office. Payroll, invoices, taxes, contracts, vendor accounts. If my father built the visible things, my mother built the paper underneath them. My older sister, Brooke, built the image. Brooke was 5 years older than I was and had the kind of charm that made adults lean toward her. She could turn a late payment into a misunderstanding and a bad decision into a story about courage. My parents called her ambitious. They called me sensible, reliable, mature. The child who could be handed bad news because she handled things well. It took me years to understand that in some families, competence is not rewarded. It is harvested. My grandmother, June Rowan, was different. She lived 10 minutes from us in a white farmhouse with a sagging porch and a kitchen where nothing matched. She taught me how to make biscuits, balance a check register, and leave a room when somebody wanted my silence more than my company. When she died, she left Brooke and me equal shares in a small cabin on Blue Heron Lake. She also left me an education account worth a little over $44,000. Brooke did not receive one because she had already finished college with my parents paying most of the bill. I was 17 and thought $44,000 was the most beautiful number I had ever seen. I had been accepted to a state university 2 hours away. I wanted to study criminal justice and finance. I had mapped out tuition, housing, books, work study, and exactly how many hours I would need to work each week. The spring I graduated, the university asked for updated documentation on the account. My mother kept saying she would get it. Then she said the bank was slow. Then she said there was no point worrying during graduation week. So I went to the credit union myself. The woman behind the desk had known me since I was little. She called me Tessie, asked if I was excited about college, and opened the account. Her smile disappeared. The balance was $4,280. I asked if she had the wrong account. She turned the screen toward me. There had been withdrawals for almost 18 months. 4,000, 2,500, 6,000, 3,200. Never enough at once to look like a robbery, just a steady draining. My mother was the custody. Then, her authorization appeared on every transaction. I asked for printed statements. In my car outside a gas station, I lined up the withdrawals with dates on my phone. 3 large ones matched milestones at a new business Brooke had been promoting online. Magnolia Gate events. An old tobacco barn she had transformed into a wedding venue with chandeliers, velvet chairs, reclaimed tables, and an Instagram page full of words like timeless and elevated. My parents told everyone Brooke was bringing sophistication to Pine Haven. Apparently, my education had helped finance sophistication. At dinner that night, I put the statements on the table. I did not accuse anyone at first. I asked my mother why the balance was almost gone. She looked at my father. My father looked at Brooke. Then my mother said, we were going to replace it. The venue had gone over budget. A contractor had demanded payment. Wedding season would bring cash. The money had stayed inside the family, my father said. Brooke told me I could take a year off. She said I was smart enough to find scholarships and practical enough to land on my feet. She reminded me that she had finally found the thing she was meant to do and asked why I wanted to punish everyone because the timing had been difficult. I asked whether Grandma, June, knew my college money would buy wedding furniture. My mother's face hardened. I used the word stolen. That was when Brooke stood up. She said she was finished being treated like the villain in her own home. She said I had resented her my whole life. If our parents allowed me to speak to her that way after everything the family had invested in Magnolia Gate, she would leave Pine Haven, shut down the venue, and never come back. Then she looked at them. You can have her attitude or you can have me. I won't live with both. I still remember the ceiling fan turning over the table. My mother rubbing the edge of her napkin. My father taking a drink before he answered. He told me I was 18 now, and maybe it was time to learn what adulthood looked like. My mother insisted no one was throwing me away. Then she carried an old duffel bag into my room and asked which clothes I actually needed. That was my family's specialty. They could do something cruel while objecting to the vocabulary. I packed because some part of me still believed they would stop me at the door. They did not. My mother gave me $60. My father said, "You're resourceful, Tess. That's one thing we never have to worry about with you." I wanted to ask why being resourceful had become the reason I could be sacrificed. Instead, I walked down the driveway. For 6 weeks, I slept in the spare room of my friend Kayla's mother, Marlene Foster. Marlene had 2 cats, a noisy air conditioner, and a rule that nobody apologized for taking up space in her house. She never asked why my parents had not come for me. She just cleared a bathroom shelf and put a clean towel on my bed. I worked at a pharmacy and a movie theater, enrolled at community college, then transferred with grants and a scholarship. I finished my degree, started in property claims, moved into investigations, and discovered I was good at reconstructing truth from details people ignored. A receipt, a timestamp, a metadata field, a witness who remembered the wrong-colored car. I moved to Raleigh at 26 and bought my condo at 30. What I never learned was how to stop wanting my parents to regret what they had done. Every promotion carried a ridiculous fantasy that news might drift back to Pinehaven, and my father would realize he had miscalculated me. I never contacted them. They never contacted me except for one birthday card when I turned 25. It contained nothing personal, just my mother's signature. I kept it in a drawer for 4 years. Healing is not always dignified. So when Cumberland Ridge Bank sent me a default notice, my first feeling was disbelief. My second was recognition. They had not missed me. They had just found a way to keep using me without having to look at me. I called the bank the next morning from my office with the door closed. A woman in special assets verified my identity, then went quiet when I said I had never signed the guarantee. There were 2 credit facilities, she told me, a revolving line and an equipment loan. Both were for Rowan custom millwork. Both had gone into default after months of partial payments. My parents were guarantors. Brooke appeared on a related party disclosure because Magnolia Gate had received funds from the business. And I was listed as an additional guarantor on both. Where were notices sent before this? She read my parents' address. 14 years after I left, the bank still believed I lived in my childhood bedroom. Then she told me the file included a copy of my driver's license. My current license was from North Carolina. Which license? She read the expiration year. It was the Virginia license I had at 18, the one I thought I lost during the weeks after I left home. I felt something inside me go still. The largest guarantee had also been notarized. Personally appeared before me, the officer read, Tessa Marie Rowan. On what date? October 19, 2022. The date felt familiar, but I could not place it yet. I asked for complete copies of everything bearing my name. Then I called Priya Shah. Priya had represented my company on a complicated identity theft matter the year before. She was quick, exact, and unimpressed by emotional fog. Her office had plants somebody else watered and a framed print that said facts first. I brought the bank letter, the birthday card, and the education account statements I had carried through 4 apartments. Priya read without interrupting. "If you didn't sign this," she said, "we are not dealing with a family disagreement. We are dealing with identity theft and document fraud." I knew that. I hated hearing it. She explained what had to happen. Formal dispute, police report, identity theft declaration, preservation notices, credit monitoring, sworn statements, and possibly federal investigators depending on how the loans were structured. Then she looked at me over the guarantee. "You'll have to identify who had access to your old identification and signature samples." I stared at the page. People think the hardest part of leaving a toxic family is leaving. Sometimes the harder part comes years later, when you have to stop editing the truth so the people who hurt you still sound respectable. I asked for time. Priya gave me one night. "Your family already used 14 years of your patience," she said. "Don't let them use the bank's deadline, too." I went home with the forms. I did not fill them out. Instead, I built a timeline. Public records showed Rowan Custom Millwork had been struggling for years. Tax liens, vendor suits, equipment financing, 2 refinances on my parents' house. Magnolia Gate Events was worse. The original company had dissolved in 2019. A second appeared months later, then a third. Brooks' social media called each rebirth a new chapter. Court records called them unpaid contractors, judgments, and debt. Every time Brooks' venue reinvented itself, my father's company borrowed. At 10:17 that night, my phone rang. "Mom." I had never deleted the contact. I answered on the 4th ring. Her voice had changed less than I expected. She asked how I was. She said she had heard I was doing very well. She told me my father's knees were bad, but he still went to the workshop every morning. Then she said there had been confusion with Cumberland Ridge. Families sometimes signed documents for one another when businesses were busy, she explained. No one had intended harm. The bank had become aggressive because of a temporary cash flow problem. Their lawyer had prepared a confirmation agreement. If I signed, everything could be resolved privately. "Did you sign my name?" I asked. Silence. "Tessa, your father is under enormous stress." "Did you sign my name?" "We were protecting what he built." "By using me." "You don't understand how many people could be hurt if you make this bigger than it needs to be." There were always other people to protect when my family needed me to disappear. I said, "I think whoever signed my name already made it exactly as big as it is." Then I hung up before my body could remember being 18. The next morning, my director asked me into a conference room. Our company had received a referral from a fidelity insurer. A regional bank had reported suspected fraudulent guarantees in a commercial loss. Cumberland Ridge. Rowan Custom Millwork. For 3 seconds, my private life felt as though it had kicked down my office door. I disclosed the conflict immediately. My director documented the recusal, restricted my access, and reassigned the matter. I was grateful. I was also terrified. Banks do not bring in outside fraud specialists because everyone thinks there has been a harmless misunderstanding. By then, Priya had obtained the loan package. We opened it at her office. The papers were ordinary in the way dangerous documents often are. Financial statements, guarantees, corporate resolutions, tax returns, a collateral schedule. My old Virginia license was there in black and white. The photograph showed an 18-year-old girl who still lived with her parents. I felt embarrassed for her before I remembered she had done nothing wrong. Then we reached the notarized guarantee. October 19, 2022. Pine Haven, Virginia. Personally appeared before Samuel, Cal Morris, Notary Public. I knew Cal. He had coached softball with my father and sold insurance across from the courthouse. Priya asked whether I knew where I had been that day. I opened my calendar. Then I saw it. State v. Danner. A fraud prosecution in Wake County. I had testified for my com. Paney that morning. There was a court transcript, a witness log, security records, an expense report, and a photograph my colleague Camille had taken outside the courthouse because it was my first criminal trial. At 10:34 a.m., according to Cal Morris, I was in Pine Haven signing a guarantee. At 10:34 a.m., according to a court reporter, I was answering questions under oath in Raleigh, nearly 200 miles away. Priya leaned back. That is unusually clean. I did not feel clean. I felt cold. Then I turned one more page. The collateral schedule listed property on Blue Heron Lake. Grandma June's cabin. I own half of that, I said. Priya checked the document. According to this, you don't. The county registry showed my interest had been transferred to my parents 3 years earlier. Quitclaim deed. Grantor, Tessa Marie Rowan. Signature acknowledged before Cal Morris. I had never seen it. My family had not only used my identity to borrow money. They had erased my ownership first so they could place my grandmother's property behind their debt. That was the moment the case changed inside me. The loan was terrifying. The cabin was personal. Grandma had left it to both granddaughters because she believed shared things should be cared for together. My family had placed my hand on a deed without me. Priya filed the formal dispute that afternoon. I still had not sworn that my mother was the forger. Instead, I drove to Pine Haven. I told myself I needed answers before making an accusation under oath. The more honest reason was that some small part of me wanted to see whether one of them would finally choose me when the price was high enough. I stayed at a hotel by the interstate. My mother texted directions to our old house as if I might have forgotten. My father opened the door. He looked older, but age did not transform him into a different man. It just made the old one easier to see. My mother hugged me hard. For one dangerous second, my body remembered the shape of her shoulder. That is the humiliation nobody warns you about. Your nervous system can miss people your mind no longer trusts. They had made lunch on the good dishes. For 20 minutes, we spoke about my career. My father said he was proud of me. My mother said she had always known I would succeed. Then I asked about the guarantee. My father sighed. Small businesses were messy, he said. Banks demanded too much paperwork. Cal had notarized things for everybody in town. Did Mom sign my name? Your mother handled paperwork. That's not an answer. It's the answer that matters. My mother said she never believed I would become responsible for the debt. They expected to refinance. The company needed equipment. Magnolia Gate owed the millwork company money. If the venue recovered, everyone recovered. Why did you need my name? My father looked honestly confused. Because you had capacity. He explained, as if I were the one being difficult. Stable career, good credit, no children, manageable mortgage. The bank wanted another strong guarantor. Strong. The family adjective that had followed me out the door. Did you think about asking me? My mother reached for my hand. I moved it. That would have reopened old wounds, she said. I stared at her. So forging my name was less awkward. My father's face tightened. You keep using criminal words for family decisions. There it was. The old rule. They could do anything as long as I described it politely. I asked about the cabin. My mother went pale. My father said the title had to be consolidated because a lender would not accept a divided interest. Who signed the deed? No one answered. I looked at my mother. She looked down. I did not need a document examiner yet. Truth has a posture. Before I left, my father followed me into the driveway. He talked about lumber prices, payroll, Brooks' debts, my mother's insurance, men who had worked for him for decades. Then he said, some people in a family can carry more. You always could. I looked back at the house. Did it ever occur to you that I learned to carry more because nobody helped me? He frowned. Not defensively. Genuinely. As if the question had never been entered into the system. The next morning, Brooke texted, Magnolia Gate, 11. I almost ignored it. Then I went. The venue looked beautiful from the road. White siding, black trim, string lights over a courtyard, a sign promising unforgettable beginnings. Inside, half the chairs were stacked against a wall, and a red past due notice was taped near the office. Brooke hugged me before I decided whether I wanted her to. You look amazing, she said. You look tired. For once, she laughed at something true. We sat in the bridal suite because the main hall echoed. For a few minutes, we talked like sisters who had simply failed to keep in touch. Then Brooke looked at her hands. Do you know what happened after why? O left. I said no. She told me our parents had doubled down on her. Every failure became a reason to invest more because admitting Magnolia Gate was failing would mean admitting what they had done to me had been pointless. Every wedding season had to prove they had backed the right daughter. Every time Brooke wanted to close, Dad reminded her what the family had sacrificed. What the family sacrificed, I repeated. She closed her eyes. I know. That was the first crack. She said she had hated me for escaping. I was the one they chose, she said. Do you know how ugly that started to feel? Part of me softened. Favoritism had not made Brooke free. It had made her responsible for proving our parents right forever. For a few minutes, I saw her clearly. Then she reached into a drawer and put a folder between us. Retroactive authorization. Release. Indemnity. The confirmation agreement. If I signed, I would state that I had given my mother permission to execute loan and property documents on my behalf. Brooke pushed a pen toward me. "You can survive this," she said. "We can't." There are sentences that explain an entire relationship. That was ours. Not we were wrong. Not I'm sorry. You can survive this. As though survival were a resource I owed them. I asked what would happen to my career if investigators later proved I had been in a courtroom when I supposedly signed the guarantee. Brooke looked away. I stood. She started crying. "Tessa, please. Dad could lose everything." I already know what that feels like. Then I left. Back in Raleigh, the family lawyer sent Priya a formal proposal. If I ratified the documents, my parents would restore my interest in the lake property after the debt was resolved. They would also begin a family reconciliation process and invite me to Christmas. Christmas appeared in the same letter as indemnity language. Camille came over that night with Thai food. She had known me since my first year in investigations and understood Pinehaven mostly in fragments. I showed her the proposal. She read it and said, "They're offering belonging as consideration." That was exactly what it was. Sign here and become our daughter again. I laughed once, then started crying so suddenly I scared myself. Camille sat on the floor beside the couch and did not tell me what to do. That is one way I learned to recognize safe people. They can love you without grabbing the steering wheel. 2 days later, Marlene called from Pinehaven. People were talking. The town's version was simple. I had become a successful corporate investigator, discovered my parents were struggling, and decided to use legal technicalities to bankrupt them. No forged signature. No stolen education money. No cabin deed. Just the cold daughter punishing the family who raised her. Marlene asked whether I wanted her to keep correcting people. I pictured her buying groceries next to my mother's friends. Let them talk. You sure? No, I said, but let them. I had spent half my life wanting the record corrected. I was beginning to understand that some audiences are not confused. They are committed. The next major piece arrived in late November. Priya had hired a forensic document examiner. The bank had subpoenaed Cal Morris's notary journal and account records tied to the loan proceeds. Cal's journal said I appeared in person on October 19 using my old driver's license, expired for more than a decade. The examiner compared the guarantee, the quitclaim deed, my education account withdrawal slips, old checks, and family documents. The same writer appeared across multiple questioned signatures. My mother. The conclusion was careful, based on stroke formation, pressure, proportions, hesitation, and repeated habits. It was strong enough that the bank's counsel stopped asking whether a forgery had happened and started asking who else knew. Then the financial records arrived. The largest draw on the credit line had not gone to millwork equipment. It moved through an affiliated account and landed at Magnolia Gate. Some paid overdue contractors, some paid taxes. A large portion funded a glass conservatory Brooke later unveiled online as our next chapter. At 18, my college money had paid for the first version of her dream. At 32, my forged credit had helped pay for the third. But the worst discovery was smaller. Buried in the file was an email from an address containing my name. It was not mine. The message said I fully supported my family's expansion and was unable to attend closing because of work travel. It authorized my mother to coordinate the documents. Near the end was a phrase, "Proud to do my part." My father had written those exact words in my high school graduation card. Metadata tied the account to the internet connection at my parents' house. The recovery number belonged to my mother. For the first time, I understood they had done more tea. Hand forge a signature. They had invented a cooperative version of me. A daughter who supported the business. A daughter who authorized everything. A daughter who had apparently never been thrown out. That broke the last excuse I had been protecting. This was not one panicked decision. They had maintained a fictional relationship with me on paper. The following week, Brooke called. Dad had collapsed at the workshop and been taken to a hospital in Roanoke. I knew the timing was terrible. I drove anyway. Boundaries do not erase attachment on command. You can know someone manipulated you and still run toward a hospital when you hear the word ambulance. By the time I arrived, my father was stable. Dehydration, exhaustion, an irregular rhythm the doctors wanted to monitor. I stood outside his room and heard my parents talking through the partially open door. My mother said my name. I stopped. "She'll be fine," my father said. "Tessa is always fine." My mother mentioned my job. "Exactly. She has a career, a house, savings. She can absorb a hit. Brooke can't. We protected the child who needed protecting." My mother said she might testify. My father was quiet. Then he said, "After everything we gave her, she can do one thing for us." I was holding a paper cup of coffee I had bought for him. My hands did not shake. I left the cup at the nurse's station and walked away. On the drive back to Raleigh, I called Priya. "I'll sign the affidavit tomorrow." She did not congratulate me. "Okay," she said. "We'll make every word accurate." The next morning, I signed an identity theft declaration, a police statement, a sworn dispute to the bank, and a chronology for investigators. I identified my mother as the likely writer based on the examiner's findings. I named my father and Brooke as people who appeared to have knowledge of or benefited from the transactions. Behind the statements went the court transcript proving where I had been, security records, the fake email, the old license, the quitclaim deed, the education account records, and the financial trail into Magnolia Gate. I read everything 3 times. Then I signed. After months of looking at imitations, the real signature seemed almost plain. That mattered. It simply belonged to me. The bank suspended collection against me while its fraud process continued. The cabin transfer became the subject of a civil action. Investigators began interviewing people in Pine Haven. My family stopped contacting me directly. Everything came through lawyers. 6 weeks later, Priya called to say there would be a settlement conference in Richmond. The bank wanted to resolve civil debt issues. My family wanted to discuss restitution, the property, and my cooperation. Do I have to go? No. Should I? Only if you know why you're going. I thought about that. I went because I wanted to see whether my family could tell the truth when lying was no longer profitable. The conference took place in a converted tobacco warehouse downtown, all brick walls and expensive glass partitions. The mediator, Elaine Porter, was a retired magistrate with the calm voice of someone accustomed to people confusing emotion with evidence. Priya sat beside me. Across the table were my parents, Brooke, and their attorney. 14 years had changed all of us. My mother's hair was almost entirely silver. My father looked smaller than he had in the hospital. Brooke wore no makeup. The bank's counsel summarized its position. The signatures attributed to me were not mine. The old identification should never have passed review. The notary acknowledgement was unreliable. The bank would confirm in writing that I had no liability and pursue recovery from the actual borrowers and guarantors. Then my family's attorney asked for a private discussion. The bank representatives left. For a moment, no one spoke. My mother started crying. Then she said, "I signed your name." Hearing the truth did not feel like I had imagined. There was no relief, only pressure shifting inside my chest. She admitted the first line she crossed had been the education account. She told herself she was borrowing because Brooke's venue would succeed. When it failed, admitting the truth would have meant admitting what they had done to me had been pointless. Years later, when the millwork company needed money, using my identity felt less impossible because they had already done it once. That was the most frightening part of her confession. Betrayal had become easier with practice. My father admitted he knew the guarantees were unauthorized. He said he had never personally written my signature, as if authorship were the important distinction. Brooke admitted she knew I had not approved the loan. She insisted she learned about the cabin deed later. Then their attorney slid a proposal across the table. My parents would consent to voiding the cabin transfer. Brooke would sign a repayment agreement. They would cooperate with the bank. In exchange, they wanted me to submit a statement saying I did not wish criminal charges pursued and considered the matter a family dispute resolved through restitution. Priya did not touch the paper. Neither did I. My mother looked at me. "We're not asking you to lie." The sentence was so carefully built. "No," I said. "You're asking me to make the truth smaller." My father leaned forward. "Your mother could go to jail." "So could I have, if I signed your confirmation agreement and investigators later proved it false." He looked away. Brooke started crying. Bookings were gone. Vendors would not extend credit. Magnolia Gate was collapsing. I believed her. I also remembered the pen she had pushed toward me. My mother asked if there was anything they could do to repair our relationship. For years, I had imagined that question. I thought I would have a speech ready. I did not. I looked at the three of them and realized I was still searching their faces for a family I could return to. I could not find it. I don't know if there is a relationship to repair, I said. When I was 18, you took money meant to help me start my life. When I objected, you made my ability to survive the reason I deserved less. Then you used the life I built without you as evidence that I could afford to be used again. Every time I became stronger, you treated that strength like available credit. No one interrupted. I am not asking prosecutors to punish you for me. I'm also not asking them to protect you for me. I will tell the truth. What happens after that belongs to the people who made the decisions. My father shook his head. So that's it. We lose our daughter over paperwork. For the first time that day, anger sharpened everything. You lost your daughter when you decided her consent was a clerical detail. The room went silent. Brooke pushed the proposal toward me. Please, just tell them you don't want charges. I don't want charges. I never wanted any of this. But wanting you safe is not the same as taking responsibility for keeping you safe from what you did. She stared at me. You're really going to let us fall? I thought about Marlene's spare room, community college, night shifts, my first apartment, Camille sitting on my floor. Every year my family had used my survival as evidence that I needed nothing. No, I said. I'm going to stop standing underneath you. I did not sign their proposal. I did sign the bank's acknowledgement that the guarantees were fraudulent and that I had no obligation on the debt. Before leaving, I asked that all future contact from my parents or Brooke come through counsel unless I changed that instruction in writing. No calls. No surprise visits. No messages through relatives. My mother cried harder. I almost withdrew the request. I did not. That was one of the hardest things I did. Boundaries rarely look dramatic from the outside. Sometimes they are one sentence spoken at normal volume. The legal aftermath took months. No instant handcuffs. No spectacular courtroom scene. Just interviews, subpoenas, negotiated pleas, financial disclosures, and consequences arriving one envelope at a time. My mother admitted signing the guarantee, the deed, and related documents. She pleaded guilty to charges connected to false statements and identity fraud. Because she cooperated and had no prior record, she received home detention, probation, and a substantial restitution obligation. My father admitted he knew the guarantees were unauthorized and had concealed transfers between the companies. He served several months in federal custody, followed by supervised release. Brooke's exposure came from the use of loan proceeds and false statements submitted for Magnolia Gate. She pleaded to a fraud-related count and served time in a minimum security facility. Cal Morris lost his notary commission and his insurance appointment. Rowan Custom Millwork closed after 36 years. Its equipment was auctioned. Magnolia Gate lasted 4 more months. The chandeliers sold separately from the tables. The glass conservatory I had unknowingly helped finance went to another venue in a different county. I expected satisfaction. Mostly, I felt tired. Consequences do not return what was taken. They stop the taking. The forged deed was voided, and my ownership in the Blue Heron cabin was restored. Brooke still owned the other half through Grandma June's estate. Eventually, through attorneys, we agreed to sell. I drove there once before closing. The porch railing needed paint again. The dock leaned farther than I remembered. Inside, the kitchen smelled like dust and pine. In a drawer, I found one of Grandma's old index cards. Milk. Flour. Batteries. Call Tessa about school forms. I sat on the kitchen floor and cried. Not because the list was profound. Because I had spent 14 years wondering whether I had ever belonged somewhere without being useful, and there was my name in ordinary blue ink. No task for me to perform. No debt. No proof required. Just my name inside someone's day. When the cabin sold, my share was more money than I expected. I paid off the last of my student loans. Then I kept thinking about Marlene. At 18, a spare room had changed the direction of my life. So I used part of the money to start a small emergency grant through a Raleigh nonprofit. It helps young adults leaving unstable or controlling homes cover a security deposit, utilities, or a few weeks in a safe room while they decide what comes next. We called it the Open Door Fund. I did not put the Rowan name on it. The first person it helped was a 20-year-old nursing student named Jade, who had been sleeping in her car behind the restaurant where she worked. On move-in day, she kept saying she would pay everything back. I told her she did not have to. She asked what the catch was. There isn't one. She looked suspicious. I understood. I had once believed every kindness came with a hidden invoice. The point, I told her, is to give you enough room to make your next decision without someone else owning it. She nodded and looked away fast. I cried in my car afterward. Camille says my car has become an emotional support vehicle. She is not wrong. A year after Richmond, I received a letter from Brooke. It came through Priya, because the no-contact instructions still stood. Brooke was in a halfway program by then, working at a print shop during the day. Her letter did something the old Brooke rarely did. It did not ask for anything. She wrote that our parents had loved her through expectation. She admitted she had hated me for leaving because I had escaped the role they gave me. She said my refusal to rescue everyone had forced her to see how much of her life had been financed by other people's fear of disappointing her. Near the end, she wrote that the worst thing our parents taught us was that one daughter had to lose for the other to be safe. I read that sentence several times. It was the first thing she had ever said about us that felt larger than her own emergency. I have not reconciled with Brooke. I have not reconciled with my parents. People are uncomfortable with that answer. They want recovery to end with a reunion, because reunion gives everyone a final scene. Real life is less considerate. My mother has sent apologies through Priya. My father has sent none. Brooke and I have exchanged 3 letters, months apart. That is all I can handle. Maybe it always will be. No contact is not revenge. For me, it became the space where my nervous system finally stopped waiting for the next request disguised as love. I still have complicated days. On Mother's Day, I can be certain I made the right decision and still feel sick watching families crowd restaurant patios. When someone at work says, "Your parents must be proud," I take half a second too long to answer. If a bank envelope arrives, my pulse jumps. Sometimes I dream about the old house in Pine Haven. I am 18, standing in the hallway with a duffel bag. No one blocks the door. I am the one who cannot make myself leave. Therapy helped me understand that trauma is not always being trapped. Sometimes it is being trained to call the trap home. My life now is not dramatic. That is one of the things I love most about it. I still work investigations, though I moved into a supervisory role. Camille lives 15 minutes away. Marlene visits twice a year and complains that Raleigh does not know how to make proper biscuits. Last Thanksgiving, my table held Camille, her brother and his partner, Marlene, my neighbor Gwen, Priya, who claimed she was only stopping by and stayed 4 hours, and Jade, now in her second year of nursing school. At one point, I looked around and realized nobody at the table shared my last name. The realization did not make me sad. It made me breathe easier. For most of my childhood, I believed family was a structure you were born inside and had to keep standing no matter which beams rotted. Now I think family is the people who do not make you disappear to keep themselves comfortable. The people who ask before they use your name. The people who can hear no without translating it into betrayal. The people who help because you need help, not because they are purchasing access to you later. For years, I thought the greatest thing my parents took from me was money. Then I thought it was college. Then the cabin. I was wrong. The most expensive thing they took was my belief that love could exist without a transaction attached. Getting that belief back took longer than the legal case. But I did get it back. Not from them. From people who never demanded that I prove how much pain I could carry. I still have the first default letter from Cumberland Ridge. Priya once told me I could throw tea away. I keep it in a file cabinet at home. Not because I am afraid. Because sometimes I need to remember how the whole thing began. A bank told me I owed almost $300,000 for a promise I had never made. My family had spent years assuming my strength was a promise too. A promise that I would cope, that I would understand, that I would take less, that I would rescue them because I had always rescued myself. They were wrong. Strength is not consent. Survival is not permission. And being the person who can carry the weight does not mean you are required to keep standing under it. If this story brought someone to mind who has been taught to confuse love with obligation, share it with them. Tell me in the comments which boundary finally gave you your life back. Subscribe to After Silence Stories, and I'll meet you in the next episode.